Hello, Dave here. We got this. I only watched one video from this guy, but we got this guy that, like he thinks he understands the mind of an evangel. And I'm not saying these people are perfect, but this guy here, Holy Kool-Aid, he's an atheist. He obviously never, I guess here's a picture of him here, right? Obviously he's never had any real Christian experiences. Because I guess he doesn't understand faith, I guess. I guess he thinks that faith is something that you believe because other people believe the same thing. I don't know what he believes. I guess he's got some videos here about his history in the church or a church or whatever. And then he's got a video how he became an atheist. I guess I'll have to click on it sometime. What's interesting, it says, if you enjoy it, please consider supporting my work. It's interesting. That's his fruit as far as, and I'm not talking about what he views as religion, but as in truth. Everybody produces something based on the belief system of their heart. Like Solomon said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So this guy's producing based on his belief systems. But I guess what he doesn't understand is Christianity. And not Christianity, but the real deal. Now, I'm amazed that someone could be in the Christian world and be an atheist. That's what amazes me. I guess it's possible, especially in this Christian world that we live in right now, with the prosperity gospel and all these different things. Well, I guess what this guy doesn't understand is that real faith comes from real experiences. It doesn't come from reading the Bible. Every supernatural experience that I've had, it backs up the Bible. And I'm not your classic, like this guy would judge me horribly, but that's okay. He can't judge me because number one, he's not God. What I love is the definition of wisdom, which is the power to judge and make the soundest judgment based on knowledge, experience, and understanding. Now, faith is something from real experiences. You don't get faith by listening to what people preach. You don't get faith from, you can get faith if there's a real manifestation or a fruit of what people preach. Just like this guy's producing a fruit based on his belief systems. If people have the real thing, there's an actual fruit or a manifestation, a supernatural happening of some kind. For example, when I was 20 years old, I could sit there in church, and this, mind you, this was a Baptist church, which isn't considered the real spiritual type churches, but I could sit there and ask a question in my mind, and the minister would answer it for an entire service. So that's what real faith is. Real faith is a manifestation that you know without a doubt that this is real. Well, I don't understand how someone could be. I guess it's possible to be in churches. I can go by only by my own encounters. But my first encounter was when I was like 14, 15, a guy tricked me into getting saved. And I didn't know anything about anything. I mean, none of my family was in church. Maybe that's this guy's problem. Maybe he comes from a church background of some kind. And he was forced to believe something. Me, I was the total opposite. I had no interest at all. My family didn't go to church. No one I knew tried to force me to go to church. I didn't know anything about anything. So I go to a basketball practice and some guy tricks me into getting born again. And I didn't even know that I got born again. All I know is this. I did this prayer and this guy said, the only way you can get to God is through this guy named Jesus. And I didn't know who Jesus was. Didn't care. So at least I was honest. I was completely honest, and God honored that. So about 2 or 3, I don't know how, if it was a month or if it was weeks, because I'm 62 years old now, and all of a sudden God showed up. And I'm not stupid, I worked in the medical field for 20 years, and I've done some stupid things in my time, but I've been studying the mind, and probably know more than just about anyone on most people alive about how the mind works. So I've been studying it for about the last 8 years as far as how the mind works, and I use my own mind kind of like an Einstein type study where you just consider it and you look at it and you study it. So the mind is very simple for me on how it works, and people aren't much of a mystery to me. And I also worked in the medical field for 20 years, but I did find out that I had severe attention deficit disorder, which doesn't mean a person is not intelligent. It means they have trouble focusing, which is what I've found. Most preachers are like that. And the reason they're like that is you have to hear your inner voice. And it's not that God can't speak in an audible voice. I've heard that twice. When I was about 20 years old, I've heard God speak in an audible voice twice, and it took me 40 years to realize how intelligent God was. But He's only speaking to me in an audible voice twice. But it took me about 40 years just to realize that God's no joke, man. God has total understanding of everyone and why you do every single little tiny thing you say. That's why the Bible says every idle word that you speak, you'll be held accountable in the day of judgment. It's very simple for me to know these things because I have a gift. I don't speak in tongues, but I have a gift of wisdom, which is really the wise man who came and knew that Jesus was there when all of the so-called church of Israel had no clue. So that's the kind of stock that God's rising up through someone like me, and I might be one that judges the church, because there was a prophecy about me about 40 years ago when one of my ministers were preaching, and I knew he was talking about me, saying that I would be a judge. And I didn't know anything about judges in the Bible. I didn't even know that there were judges in the Bible. But I not only can judge the church, I can judge this guy here. So, but basically this guy doesn't, he must not have had any real supernatural experiences, is the only thing I can figure. And I was not a perfect Christian. But this is so far over this guy's psychological head. And it's also so far over the Christian, typical Christian, even evangel's psychological head. Because my understanding goes beyond them. My understanding goes beyond this guy. Even though I don't know anything about him. If he... It's easy to spot out the spiritual DNA or flaws in an individual. Like, for example, you had a crazy nut in the Bible called Saul, who became Paul. But God didn't take all the craziness out of Saul, who became Paul. You still see someone that really never manifested or became like a John in the Bible. Like John is it's like a different type of Christian, totally different type of Christian, because he's got that scribe and Pharisee. See, this guy doesn't understand spiritual DNA. Back in 2008, I was going to write a book about spiritual DNA. God started revealing me. Every word that you speak, and I don't even know this guy's name. Let's see if this guy has a name. He calls himself Holy Kool-Aid. But what he doesn't understand is that every word that he speaks comes from a spiritual place in his heart. Solomon said, as a man thinks, so is he. So he doesn't understand he has a spiritual DNA, and if it's... He doesn't understand that everything that he speaks comes from a belief system of his heart. Now, Jesus was very specific on this stuff. He said, let the dead bury the dead. If this guy's an atheist, well, he's spiritually dead. But if he believes even for a second, see, he doesn't understand that Satan is the sower of spiritual DNA. He doesn't understand that even Paul was buffeted by demons. See, he doesn't understand that the scribe and Pharisee legalistic mentality drew demons to him. In some great presidents, they called it the law of attraction. What it actually is, it's a law of attracting either angels or demons. And these are real forces that can't be seen. Of course, there's some Christians that can see them. But you don't need to be able to see them to feel them and to know their presence around. Because I've heard him speak to me on quite a few occasions, and they don't lie. They do not lie. Like my first encounter with an angel, basically I was getting ready to I was probably about 20-some years old, and I was going to do something that was sinful. And the angel said to me, and there are angels that sound like females, and the angel said to me, if you do this, you'll lose your job. And you could kind of hear these angels play an interesting game. See, this guy doesn't understand faith. He doesn't even believe, let alone understand faith. And most Christians don't even understand faith either. But faith is an actual veil that God put on man to actually protect him. It's the fact that this guy has no belief that he's not being judged severely for the words he's speaking. Even though he will be judged, because God's not mocked. Whatever a man sows, he will reap. So, and everything that a person does for a reason. There's nothing that's new under the sun. Everything that every man does there's a reason behind it. There's an agenda. It's like a fingerprint. And he doesn't understand any of these things. He doesn't understand that he's basically a puppet for Satan. And any Christian, he doesn't understand that a Christian can have a demon. He doesn't understand that a Christian can be a satanic puppet to a degree. He doesn't understand any of this stuff. Because he doesn't understand how it works. And let's face it, most Christians don't have a clue. But it's very simple. It's very simple. You are born of a word. And the Bible is very clear on that. A word is either life or a word is death. You can only make water one way. It's called H2O. It's not H3O. It's not, it's not 2H2O. It's only made one way. And it either makes water or it don't. And Satan is very crafty, and I mean, he's an artist, just like our DNA. Our DNA is something that they're just now starting to crack the code. They haven't even begun to crack it. They just started. And spiritual DNA is exactly the same. And this guy has no clue. This guy has absolutely no clue that spiritual DNA is exactly the same way, and it's very hidden. And Satan is an expert at creating disease in spiritual churches. And then he might be seeing some of the disease, which it's there. It's in every single person. There isn't a person alive that was like Jesus. Not one. That's why Jesus said, "Why call me good?" But the guy that came up to him didn't know that he came from the Father and he was the Son of God, and that there was no evil in him. And this guy has no clue that Sarah's seed was resurrected. This guy has no clue. See, all these things that God has shown me, he doesn't know that the word God is in the King James Version of the Bible 4,444 times. And he has no clue what 4 means. 4 represents DNA. For example, your DNA, in which all life comes, has 4 letters. And Jesus, who's the Word, remember, words are either life or death. Word is a 4-letter word. Who else is Jesus? Jesus is what? The King. That's a 4-letter word. God, who is love, 4-letter word. Even the word God is not G-O-D. It's a 4-letter word. In Hebrew, it's pronounced 4 letters. Then you have the closest disciple to Jesus, who's John, 4 letters, who wrote what? The 4th gospel. And Jesus, who's the King, 4 letters. He doesn't see how that God signs his name to things because he's spiritually dead and blind. And no one taught me any of this stuff. I didn't learn this from not one single church person. It's a spiritual gift, G-I-F-T. G-I-F-T, that's 4 letters also. Duh. So it's a spiritual gift. And no one taught, even God, who is love, L-O-V-E, is a 4-letter word. Now, I didn't learn any of this from any of these so-called ministers that he's making fun of. I didn't learn any of this stuff from any minister, because that's not how God works. He can work that way, but it's easy for me to see the spiritual DNA. If anybody should be judging these people, it should be me, not him. What does this guy know? And I'm not going to judge him, because in the Bible, David, who Saul was trying to murder him, David had a chance to kill Saul and take a sword and chop his head off, like he did the giant. And David didn't do it because he knew better than to touch God's anointed. Now, what this guy doesn't know is that these people are flawed, and yes, Satan has flaws in them, just like there was flaws in Paul. Demons were attracted to Saul because of his religion, the spiritual DNA that Satan sowed in the church, in which they were totally blind and rejected Jesus when he came. The only people who could see were the wise men, which is the spiritual gift that I have. It's a spiritual gift of understanding. Now let me teach this guy a little bit of stuff here. teach him a little bit of stuff about even Christianity. To even Sid Roth, who's done interviews of supernatural experiences for 40 years, and many of these experiences, and I've never met any of these people ever. I don't know any of these people, but I've had the same supernatural experiences as a lot of these people on his show, and that's how God works. But let's go to a guy named Shane Wall, who has my gift. I didn't even know what my gift was until I happened to see this guy, Shane Wall. Let me see if I'm even recording here. Yeah, I'm recording good. But this is what keeps people from seeing is Satan. Even Oprah, who has her own views and created her own religion, who has a network called OWN, because it's from her own image, her own spiritual understanding. She has rejected the Bible also, but at least she believes in God. She's not totally blind. But anybody can be dead, spiritually dead. It sounds like this guy's... I mean, if you don't believe, you basically either got hurt by somebody in the church or something, and then it somehow blinded you. It put a veil on your spiritual sensor. When you get born again, you get a spiritual sensor. I'm sure this guy doesn't understand. Even most Christians don't understand this stuff. But when you get born again, all you get is a sensor. Like everything that man builds is a sensor. Like, see these right here? That's a sensor. That makes me see what I can't normally see. A microscope, a sensor. A telescope, a sensor. Even the Hadron Collider is nothing but a sensor. Now we can never see atoms, but we built something. We built a sensor so we can see it. That's what we do. We build sensors. But when you get born again, you get a sensor. Now this sensor, it enables you to sense into the realm, or a spiritual realm, which is another dimensional, totally different dimension than what we live in which other entities can be standing right next to you, and you can't see them. You don't think they're there, but that's all by design. You know, President Kennedy said, things do not happen, things are made to happen. Well, when it comes to God, things are made to happen. There's no... It's not an accident. It's just like I was talking about all those fours. Even a cross has 4 points. Let me think what else has a 4. None of that happened by an accident. The fact that... And even science, like it says in John chapter 1, nothing was made without the word that was made. And there's so many truths to that, because even scientists know that, for example, if information goes into a black hole, that the information remains right there as on a disc, almost like a laser disc. The information, it's not lost. Just like energy can't be created or destroyed, information that makes up everything in this universe is not lost. For example, E is equal to mc squared. It's never lost. It's either converted into either energy or matter. Now, what this guy doesn't understand is that every word has an energy per se. Every word has a spiritual DNA. It's either life or death. And if you're dead, if you're spiritually dead, that means your sensor doesn't work. And that's why people get born again. When you get born again, you get another spirit, and then that spirit is like God's spirit, right? It's a spirit like his, because what he doesn't understand in Genesis is Satan changed the original spirit that we had, and when Adam had a child, it was in his what? In his what? What? In his own image. It was no longer in his image. And see, that's when Satan got access like a Trojan horse into man. That's why people like Carrie Fisher gets electric shock therapy before she died, just to function, because she would have all these demonic forces speaking to her in her spirit, and she would just go nutso, and she had to have an electric shock therapy just to have a functional, normal life of any kind. Whitney Houston, drugs, to function, to quiet all those voices, all those internal voices. And see, he doesn't understand in Genesis, Satan changed. We took in his word. Remember, Jesus, you get born again by what? Jesus. And who's Jesus? He's the Word. You get born of a word. You get born by Jesus, which is a word. Then all of a sudden, you start sensing a realm that you never knew existed. I mean, I can tell you hundreds of things that I've sensed, things that I've seen on this show time and time again that bear witness that what I've experienced is real. But I didn't need any of this to know that what I experienced was real. I didn't need to see the other people having the exact same experiences. But this is where Satan gets on most Christians and screws them up. Then you got someone like this guy here mocking them. Like he really understands the mind of an evangelist. Like he can understand the spiritual DNA. I don't think so. You're an atheist. How can you understand something that you have not experienced?
They think that they want the super.
28278. Please specify.
Like his spiritual DNA, if he watched this episode of Sid Roth here, what he would see with his spiritual eyes or his spiritual DNA, he would see things like, oh, here's Sid, he's just selling this for money. Because see, that's how he sees. Jesus said you have eyes to hear, and you have ears and eyes, but you hear not or see not. See, because he would just see his like DNA of what he believes in his heart. And I believe in my heart from real supernatural experiences that they're always backed up by 2 or 3 witnesses. And there's thousands of witnesses here, thousands of witnesses. And is he going to see negative stuff in every personal life? Of course. And it depends spiritually where they're at. I'm just finally, after 40 years, I kind of walked in the wilderness for 40 years, and they had supernatural experiences when they were in the wilderness. God fed them with supernatural manna. Just because you're walking in a wilderness time in your life, Moses was killed, murdered a man, was in the wilderness. What he doesn't understand is that a human being only lives at most 120 years. And it takes a good while for you to start to wake up in a spiritual level. You're not going to do it as a kid. I'm 62 years old. I'm just now starting to mature a little bit as a Christian. Just a little bit. I don't claim to have arrived. I don't claim to have done anything in the Christian world yet, other than have some understanding. And I haven't even put that understanding to use yet.
Offer number 9.
But it's not you to judge. You can't judge anyone. You can't judge me. For you to judge me, you'd have to be like God. You would have to watch my entire life from the beginning all the way to this point right now, but that would take you a lifetime to watch my life. Then you wouldn't be able to see my thoughts and how to react to every situation. Because if you break down a human's life, it's your character is built by the DNA around it, and Satan is very prevalent in some DNA, in some cultures, cultural DNA, and that creates your belief systems. It creates everything else. It creates everything that you are in your character, and everything that you do as a human being. But this guy doesn't begin to understand these kind of things. Number one, he's an atheist. He doesn't even know about these things. But I was going to show us a little bit about the gift of understanding.
370 or
A message, a sermon on understanding, yet you told me you researched it. How many times is understanding in the Bible?
Over 300 times, Sid.
More than grace? More than belief? More than all these things that we hear messages on.
Exactly. And God focuses on understanding because whatever God says is the understanding. Where we come into fault is whenever God speaks to us and then we say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Now, how can I do? We begin to lean to our own understanding.
And that's exactly what this guy's doing. The dead, if a dead person's laying in a casket, they don't have any spiritual senses. They can't see, they can't hear, they can't speak. But unfortunately, you can be dead in the spiritual after effect of what was left over after Satan infected us in Genesis. After Eve believed Satan's word in Genesis, that was a seed and a fruit. Like, for example, the Bible says, when Abraham believed God, it was counted as righteousness. Why? Because he believed the truth. He believed the truth. Now, this guy's spiritually dead, so he sees the spiritual DNA of Satan in a lot of Christians, and there's no one that doesn't have some of the old nature in them. Even Paul himself was buffeted by demons, because he had a religious nature in him from the scribes and Pharisees that were so blind they didn't even know when Jesus, their own Messiah, showed up. That's how, and Satan did that because they were spiritually dead. Their eyes were spiritually dead. They couldn't see. They didn't even know when their own Messiah showed up. They were clueless. But that's what Satan did. He blinded them. And how did he blind them? They started leaning to their own understanding, like this guy. And it's an understanding of death. And that's why he does everything he does. He kills, steals, and destroys. That's the spiritual fingerprint of death, of the satanic, of being dead. The dead, for example, the Legion in the Bible, the guy that had 1,000 demons, it was natural for him to wander in the tombs. And this guy, it's natural for him to be among his own kind, or to find the fault in Christians who have the spiritual DNA that he sees as death. So he's wandering in the tombs of death, of DNA, of these spiritual Christians, which he sees death in them. And I haven't even looked at as many as goes to see if his judgment is right, because wisdom is the power to judge and make the soundest judgment based on knowledge, experience, and understanding. And I can already see this guy's behavior. This guy will become a stalker of me. He'll start to stalk me and do the exact same thing. And I tell you what, he can find plenty of death in my past. He can find lots of it because I lived in that. I believed, even the demons my belief in God never stopped. But in 1994, on July 3rd, I can give you the exact day, I turned back into sin. Because I was spiritually dominated in the mind. in a way that he has no clue. Even Christians have no clue. But there was a very powerful spiritual domination, and that was created from my childhood because of the spiritual atmosphere I was in. In psychology, they would call it introversion or ADD. Introvert or an ADD type personality. And I'm gonna explain all the things I know about the mind. I've got books and books lined up that I'm gonna write to explain how the mind works. I'm not gonna give away too many secrets here. But I'm no idiot when it comes to this kind of understanding. I'm no idiot when it comes to understanding the mind. And I'm no idiot when it comes to understanding Christians. Because this guy has two gifts. This guy can see angels. And he said that angels have wings, you know. And I can remember about, it's probably about 30, 40 years ago. I remember I was in my house, totally, there wasn't a window open. We had no chimney in this house. I remember being in my house, and I remember hearing these powerful wings flapping, and I could tell by the sound, because I'm no idiot. I worked in the medical field for 20 years, in school, got a 4.0, almost a 4.0 in one of the toughest medical schools in respiratory therapy I think it was one of the best in the country as far as schools. They actually got higher scores than there was a 2-year program school. I went to a 1-year program. And they actually got higher grades in this school from the people they produced than people that went to 2-year programs, which was no joke of a program. The other program was no joke. But the people that came out of my class, so I ended up almost getting a 4.0 average on that thing. And I had severe attention deficit disorder, so I had to really focus to listen. I had to use a tape recorder, but I got a 4.0. So it proved to me that there was nothing wrong with my intelligence, but the only thing that was wrong with me was my ability to focus. And that's a very interesting spiritual thing, which I've been working on for 8 or 9 years. And there's a very powerful spiritual connection to that, which goes beyond most people's understanding. And I'm not even going to begin to explain it here. It's not like I have to prove anything to this guy or anyone else. But this guy obviously doesn't have any real supernatural experiences. But I heard an angel in my house. I couldn't see it, but I heard the wings. And see, God does that deliberately. If you look in the Bible, you'll see where the children of Israel had a powerful manifestation as they came out of Egypt. God spoke in a thunder's voice, and then all of a sudden, they kept sinning, and then they got judged, and God said, "Those that sin I will blot out of my book." And I was like to God, well, I thought there was always forgiveness of sins. So I prayed to God about it. I'm like, why isn't there forgiveness of sins? Because that didn't make any sense to me, because I was always taught by the few churches I went to that there was forgiveness of sins. And I couldn't understand it. So finally, God brought me the revelation, and he showed me that if you start to get the revelation of an angel as they got out of Egypt, all the manifestations that they had, all of a sudden the revelation came to me, and revelation is an instant thing. For example, if you have a near-death experience, or if this guy right here dies, he'll immediately, as soon as he leaves the veil of his body, he'll immediately start sensing truth. Truth will permeate him instantly. He'll have understanding of things he never understood, and it'll be instantaneous. All of a sudden, he'll go from no understanding to instant understanding. That's called revelation. So if he has a near-death experience, and he goes very far in the near-death experience, he'll start to have revelation after revelation after revelation, and it's instant download of information and of understanding. All of a sudden, 1 second you don't understand, next second you understand. So that's how revelation works. And even in Genesis, when they ate the fruit, instant download of information. And they're starting to create artificial intelligent computers that can communicate huge volumes of information back and forth between each other. And it's going to be a very scary thing because they'll be able to communicate 100,000 books of information in a second to another computer, and it can have 100,000 books of information, and it can speak that language instantly back and forth. Now that's going to be possible among computers. Now you think that that doesn't happen in the spiritual world? You think that in the spirit world, when you die and you have a near-death experience, that you're not going to have instant understanding of volumes and volumes and volumes of information? You think it's not possible? Not in this dumb brain that we have, and not in an inferior conversation in which we communicate. No. What's the guy's name that owns Telsa? He's researching and talking about some things of that nature. But this stuff has already existed in Genesis. When they ate the fruit, there was instant download of information. And I know about this kind of stuff because I've had it happen. I've seen God instantly give me information, instant understanding. And you don't have to die to get it when you got the sensor. When you get born again, you get a sensor. Or if you have a gift, a spiritual gift of some kind. I have a spiritual gift of understanding. So I found out that the reason these people got judged and blotted out of the book is because they had too much revelation, too much understanding. God showed it, manifested itself too many times to them, and they started to get the revelation of an angel, and that's why angels didn't get forgiveness of sin. So basically, you're lucky that you're an atheist, because the things you're sowing, you're going to reap something. Now, if you had belief, and if you actually had faith and you sowed this kind of things, you'd be in big trouble. But obviously you don't have any faith. So just like the people that murdered Jesus, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You don't know what you're doing because you're spiritually dead. You're an atheist. You have no sense, or you have no ability to sense reality. But faith is something God gradually gives. I've had so many manifestations, and I've never smoked drugs in my life. I got drunk one time just to see what the hell everyone was doing. You know, why in the hell everyone is getting drunk? And yes, I say hell, I'm not your typical Christian. And I don't go to church. I couldn't stand to go to church because, I mean, there's some churches out there I would go to, but they'd have to be extremely high quality. I'm just not going to go to your average church, even though there's some things I'm sure I could learn from them. If God's in it, there's something for me there, but I can't stand to be around most Christians. As far as, because they're flawed. And I'm not saying I'm not flawed too, because I know that I am. All you have to do is listen to your thoughts and know that you're flawed. For example, there was this chick named Sandra Kennedy, and she was talking about, you know, how she would by faith put the blood of Jesus Christ like a high priest on her every day. She'd wash herself in the blood, and she looked kind of kooky doing it, to be honest. You know, I thought, well, I didn't know that much about the blood. You know, God started teaching me by revelation once again, because I thought it was stupid. I mean, I really did. I thought that the blood of Jesus, that's just some stupid thing these Christians picked up, and it don't mean nothing. Well, why are they even talking about this blood and all this stuff? I thought it was stupid. Until one day I pleaded the blood. All of a sudden, people start giving me free food and stuff. So then I skip a few days, and all of a sudden I plead the blood over me again. Sure enough, the next day, people start giving me free food. And in Egypt, when they put the blood on the doorpost, they got escape from demonic powers and forces that kept from murdering their children. But it somehow puts up basically, to my understanding, because I have to understand things, how they work. Basically, it's almost like in a court of law. If you could silence your accuser, let's say you went to a court of law and you're in court, and you're forced to go to court, and you're sitting there waiting for your accuser to show up. Pleading the blood silences your accuser. So what happens when you plead the blood? Your accuser has no voice. They can't charge you with anything. And that's basically what I've learned of how it works. And then God also then is attracted to you. Because God is this holy God. But let me explain how it works. Anyway, I did what she was talking about. I thought, well, if that works, why don't I do that and I take communion too? So I took communion, which I don't do very, very rarely. I need to start doing it, to be honest. So I take communion, and first I wash myself in the blood, then I take communion, and then the Father shows up. And remember I was telling you how God showed up when I was like 14, 15 years old? And I really didn't explain what it was like, but when God showed up, when I was 14, 15, after I had that little honest prayer, I had no clue who Jesus was. But it was kind of strange. Why would God show up before Jesus? Well, that's what he did in the Old Testament. The entire Old Testament was God. You didn't see the introduction of Jesus until part 2. So I didn't know Jesus, but I did this prayer. This guy had me pray through this guy named Jesus, which I had no clue who he was. And then God showed up. So God the Father showed up, and when he was around, it was like Christmas. I kid you not, when he showed up, it was like Christmas. I was like, wow, I don't want to lose this. Because when he was around, his presence, it was the atmosphere of heaven, basically, which is a totally different atmosphere than this place. But when he showed up, let's make sure I don't get myself muted. I'm not even supposed to be up right now. But when God showed up, it was, all I can describe is like in the Bible, wherever the Ark of the Covenant went, it blessed the nation. So when God showed up with me and was dwelling, I guess, in my tabernacle, like Paul talks about, I didn't know that he was dwelling in me. I just knew that he showed up. I didn't even know that I invited him in. I didn't know that little prayer I did would even do anything. And I just wanted to get the hell away from the guy that had me do that little prayer. And I never went back to church. None of this happened in church. None of it did. So God shows up, and it's like the best thing ever. I mean, just the feeling of it was comforting. And I felt this presence that cared about me. And I was like, and then when it was around, it was like Christmas. It was like he was blessing everything, all the people around me. There was something special. It changed the total atmosphere of everything around me and anybody around me. It even caused the guy across the street to fall under conviction. And he got saved, and just from him watching me. And it was interesting when he was around, and I didn't want to lose it, but I didn't know nothing about this. I knew nothing about Jesus. I knew nothing about nothing. So I didn't want to lose it. And to be honest with you right now, I'm not anywhere near close to God than I was then. I'm not anywhere near it. I'm barely considered a Christian in my book, if that. It's almost like I need to get reborn and rebaptized again. But that doesn't mean that I've had a lot of supernatural experiences, which I have, a lot of them. Because God pursues you. God pursues you. Even the reason I'm making a video right now, God is pursuing you. Yes, you. God is in pursuit of you. And I haven't listened to any of your videos. I think I listened to one, just real brief. But it doesn't matter. Because Satan, you got to understand this, all this havoc that's going on is created by Satan. Anyway, before I shift into that, let me finish how my encounter with God. Not knowing anything about church, not growing up in church, still not in church. So I'm experiencing God, and it's the best thing ever, and I don't want to lose it. I'm even to the point where I'm like, hoping I never wake up one day and this goes away. But it did finally go away because I actually got fearful that it would go away, and when I got fearful that it would go away, it finally eventually did. Because I thought it would go away, and it did. Which is kind of funny to me now, because all that is it's really the same thing Job did. Job said, the thing that I feared came upon me. See, God likes faith because faith deals with truth, and that's a part of what God is. There's certain things in what God is. God is love. God is truth. God is holy. I mean, it's a perfect holiness. So let me finish with this thing before I finish with the revelation I had when I was 14. But anyway, I took the blood, like this Sandra Kennedy said to do, to apply by faith. Wash yourself in the blood like the high priest in the Old Testament. The high priest would cover themselves with blood. And no one knows I did this other than me and God and now you guys. And I've shared it a few times in some videos. So then I took communion too. And when I did that, I thought, well, if it's good to cover yourself in the blood, let me take communion also. Because if the one worked, why not do both? That seemed to make logical sense to me. So when I did that, the Father showed up like he did 40 years ago. 40 years ago, when I first had that encounter with God when I was 14, it was probably more than 44. It was probably more like 44 years ago instead of 40 years ago. Because I was maybe even more than that. But it doesn't matter. It was a long time ago. But I remember it as clear and perfectly. I haven't forgotten not even one bit of it. Not at all. But it was the most fantastic thing, and it was comforting. So anyway, I did what she said to do. Cover yourself by faith in the blood of Jesus, like washing yourself in the blood. And I thought, well, I'll take communion. And then the Father showed up, and I hadn't experienced that quite like that for probably 40 years ago. And when God showed up again, it was like the best thing ever. Everything was blessed. He was around me. And the interesting thing that drove him away, which was a revelation in itself, is I was in some chat room, and hanging around, because I don't really like hanging around with Christians, so I hang around with people that are not Christians, because I can kind of like be myself, right? I don't want to hang around with Christians because they have spiritual DNA of religion in them, and I can't stand religion. Because religion is a spiritual DNA either of their self or of Satan. And I don't want to be around someone that has a spiritual DNA of their self. Like if you go to church, people say, shake your hand, and they'll say, hey brother, how you doing? And I cannot stand that because it's horseshit. And yes, I said shit. But it's horseshit. They're acting and pretending to be Christians when they don't. If they're really a Christian, they'll ask me out to eat after church or something. If God really is in their heart, then they'll know where I'm at. Like I've went to churches, and I've walked out 20 times more lonely than when I walked in. Now, if they really had God's heart in them, their censor would help me in some way, and they would have invited me out or this or that. But I will give them this much, that the spirit in me at that time wasn't a good spirit, so I'm sure no one was drawn to me. But if they really had a really powerful part of God in them, it would have overrode my spirit, and they would have asked me out to dinner, or at least, made me not go away feeling 20 times more lonely than I did when I got to church. But I really don't want to be around them anyway, because number one, they're not real. I would rather hang around Howard Stern than I would them. That's how I feel about them. And not all of them, because I'm a real person, and so is God. But the difference between God and me, going back to this story, is somebody came in one of my chat rooms, I was hanging out on Twitch, and so someone came into one of my chat rooms and they said, they pissed me off. And I got angry at him, and it wasn't anything real bad. I was just angry at him. And as soon as I got angry at him, I felt the Father's presence lift off that I had got on me from the blood, from taking communion. See, the bread is the Word of God, like it says in Joshua chapter 1, to meditate on God's Word night and day. So the bread is the Word of God, because there's a scripture where Jesus spoke to his disciples, and he said, after I spoke the word to you, and I cleansed you by my word. See, in Genesis, they were contaminated by Satan's word. Eve was contaminated. And you're only contaminated by a word if it sticks with you. For example, in Proverbs it says, if you answer a fool, you become like him. Perhaps I shouldn't even be answering you. Not that you spoke to me. But anyway, that's all it took to drive God's presence away, was just that one evil spirit in me of having of being pissed at a person who actually spoke to me in chat something evil. That shows you how holy the Father's spirit presence is. And I didn't know any of this stuff. Probably the reason God manifested himself to me when I was younger, 14, 15, because you're more pure back in that time. Your heart hasn't come in contact with all the garbage in the world, all the mean people, all the nastiness that exists out there, all the deception, all the lies, all the evil. I mean, it's just so thick out there. It's almost like in the Dust Bowl, when they couldn't even go outside, they couldn't breathe the air without it filling in their chest. And this happened 100 years ago, or almost about 100 years ago. In the 20s, after radio spoke and changed the entire image in its entire nation in its image. They called it the Roaring '20s. So radio totally spoke and change a nation its image, and they call it the Roaring '20s. You see women just starting to go wild and dancing and then drinking and sex and all this other crap. You see the breakdown of society, all from one voice. What Satan always speaks through something. That's what he do. Satan speaks more than anybody or anything. Now God speaks also. He's speaking all the time also, but it depends on where you're spiritually at, whether you can hear him or not. Now, if you're in the dead zone, you're in the dead zone. You're not going to hear him. Now, he might visit you in your tombs, in your dead place, like he visited the person who had a legion. And I would say that even the reason I'm responding to your video is God speaking to you, because God's been moving through me. Even though I crashed and burned and sin, I mean, I just went and sin. I went into strip bars. I did everything. I had prostitutes. I did it all. and even worse than that. But Jesus said, I'd rather you be hot or cold. He said, if you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. And I'm lukewarm right now, to be honest. Hopefully I can become hot. If not, maybe I'll go back to being cold. It could happen very easily because I came from some deep sin. I really got involved in it deep. And what I found out about sin is when they ate the fruit in Genesis, a fruit is a food and it has a seed within it. And I found out that as you eat that fruit of sin, there's a seed within it, or a spiritual DNA, and it changes you into that image, and then you start to love the sin. I mean, you love it. And what's interesting, God says the first commandment is to love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But what happens is, I found as I went into sin, and I even felt evil spirit. One time I was on this phone line trying to pick up these chicks, to have sex with them. So I'm on the phone line trying to pick up these chicks to have sex with them, and I can't even get into some of the things I got into, just crazy stuff. But I just, I thought, well, I'm sinning. What difference does it make? I might as well sample all the things of sin, and that's pretty much what I was doing. And I'm not going to get into everything that I got into because it got deep. But this one individual was talking to me. And at first I was just pissed because they were talking to me. And then finally what they said to me triggered something in me. It's funny how drugs work. Like a drug has to have a receptor. Even a virus like this COVID-19, it has to have a receptor somewhere. Like it's not going to stick on your skin and cause a virus, right? It has to penetrate probably only 3 possible areas, which would your eye, get in your nose, and your mouth. Now imagine you could wipe your rear and get it that way, because they did say that it does stick to some GI receptors, but it's got to stick to something. There's what, a billion viruses in seawater, but you can a drop of seawater. So a virus has to have a receptor, like a key that fits a lock. It's got a receptor. So there must have been something in me that this person spoke, and there was. And it was created in my childhood, and it's so far over your head, it's so far over Christians' heads, and I'm not even going to explain how it works. But there was something in my past that my parents did by their verbal abuse and causing the introversion in me, the dominating spirit, because all these evil spirits are dominating. That's one of their characteristics. Like Adam and Eve were, in a sense, raped. That's why you got these rape spirits. Even in Sodom and Gomorrah, it wasn't about homosexuality. It was about gang rape. They wanted to gang rape 2 angels because that's the spirit of it. It's a dominating spirit. They wanted to rape the hell out of those 2 angels all night long. They got off on that. It was a very dominating type spirit. So in Genesis, very dominating type spirit. These spirits are very dominating. Very dominant. And fear, very dominant spirit. Depression, very dominant spirit. Look at the guy from the lead singer in Linkin Park. Committed suicide, Robin Williams. Committed suicide. The last picture of Robin Williams, let's take a look at that real quick. You're probably thinking at this point, I've never heard a Christian like this before. But God's rising up a new remnant that's going to blow away these other Christians. But that's so far over, I don't want to say that. But let's look at the last picture of Robin Williams, one of the last pictures. The last picture of Robin Williams. And according to this spiritual prophecy, they seen Robin in hell. And look at one of the last pictures. See this little monkey on his back? This is one of the last pictures of him. And a lot of people carry around these demons, that speak to them in their ear. Like I've seen Christians that have an angel or a Holy Spirit that speaks in their ear. But if you're not hearing angels and God, well, guess what? You got yourself a little demon, and it's speaking in your ear. And I tell you what, he'll ride on your back all your life. I tell you what, when you have a weak moment, he's going to tell you to put a rope around your neck, and you're going to hang yourself and kill yourself. And I hear that Robin Williams is in hell. If you want to look it up, go on YouTube, Celebrities in Hell. But it doesn't surprise me, because I have the mind of an FBI profiler. I have an understanding of people, and by the things that God has shown me over the last 40 years, that it's very easy for me to spiritually see the spiritual place he is. Like in Genesis, God says, "Where art thou?" It's not hard for me to see that. Even the guy in Lincoln Park, I can see the spiritual place he was in. You know, he hung himself. But these demons, I tell you what, they can hang with you. The guy Legion had 1,000 demons in him, and you know, one day when I was on the phone talking to somebody, something appealed to me about this. What this guy said to me, and it was very interesting. As this guy was speaking, I felt this evil spirit. And as he was speaking to me, I was like, whoa. I could feel like these people that go in these haunted houses, you can feel like they feel these cold drafts. And I just thought, you know, that's just a bunch of horse stuff. But I know better, because when this one guy was speaking to me, I felt this cold spirit, and I literally, as I was listening to this guy speak on this phone line, I literally started shaking. I mean, I was shaking just by hearing what this guy was saying to me. And the guy obviously was homosexual or something or other, and he was saying all this sexual stuff that he's doing to me, and I could feel the spirit of what he was saying to me. And this cold, I mean, I literally started shaking and shivering as I felt this evil spirit of this guy speaking. It was very amazing, because it was in the summertime, and I'm like shaking and shivering. And it's interesting that these demons have these cold spirits. But there's another time Satan came to me another time, and he tempted me another time, and it was a very sexual spirit. I guess there's different types of sexual spirits, and this one didn't even come through Satan. This just came. I was in my house one time, and I felt this powerful lust spirit, and it did not feel bad. I mean, you think of evil spirits feeling like bad, but this spirit, it was a sexual lust spirit, and it was very powerful, and it was almost like a glory type feeling. Like if you're in church and you feel like the Holy Spirit, this had a good feel to it, but it was strictly a lust type spirit of a kind, very powerful and glorious, which was surprising. And I resisted it. And what was interesting is the next day, Paula White was on. And I seen you mocking her in one of your videos, and I don't really like the woman much either myself, to be honest with you. But that doesn't mean that she isn't a Christian, because I know she is by what she manifested. But she blocked me on Twitter, and at a time where I was going through, after I'd lived in sin for quite a while, and I was going through the worst time of my life, and God had given me this spiritual gift, and I just wanted some attention, because this gift that God gave me, I knew it was no joke. So I just wanted a little attention from her on Twitter, just to say, oh, I like your spiritual gift. What does she do? In my lowest time, when I needed the most help from a Christian, what does she do? She blocks me on Twitter. And I was at a time in my life where I almost felt like hopeless, almost like there was probably like a suicide spirit at the time. I mean, this was a long time ago. Probably back in 2008. That's just like 12 years ago. 2009. Maybe 2010. At least 10 years ago. And I'm in a much better place now than I was then. But I was in such a bad place. I'd lost a really good job and was in just a horrible place. And when she blocked me on Twitter, it was almost like a death blow. It was almost like the last blow that a Christian could do to me. But before she had done that, the reason I kind of was a little not infatuated, but drawn to her is because she was on TBN, and the day after this very lustful spirit tried to tempt me, what it was trying to tempt me with, I don't even know. I guess maybe to worship its glory or to take its spirit into me or something. I don't even know. But it was very powerful. And it was very I was just amazed at the glory of this lust spirit. It was very seducing. You wouldn't think an evil spirit would be enjoyable and desiring, but it was, which is kind of surprising to me even to this day. But anyway, I resisted it because I knew it wasn't the Spirit of God, and I knew it was a sexual type spirit, so I resisted it. And so the next day, Paula White's on a show on TBN, and obviously the girl must know God. But her faith got risen up. Somebody was with her and testified to her about how God did something through her. And when she heard that, it's like her faith opened up and a river of spiritual faith and belief in herself and God opened up. And when it did, it flowed out of her, and she spoke into the TV set. And the presence of God flowed into my room. And this was one of the few times that God's presence was tangible. I've heard other Christians on Sid Roth talk about it time and time again, but it was tangible. It was thick. And it dwelt with me as I went to sleep that night. And to be quite honest with me, I felt like it was like analyzing me, almost like a doctor would come and see a patient that was sick. A doctor would examine someone who's sick. I kind of had that feeling that it was examining me, this tangible presence of God, to see what it needed to do for me to get me in a better place. And that's a constant thing that's always going on. God is always, as long as you draw near to him, he's always trying to fix you. He's always trying to restore you. I even almost died of a heart attack not too long ago, because you don't have hospitalization in some of the jobs after I got out of the medical field, because they raised the education requirements. I just had to take these horrible jobs, and I found that happens to you in a Christian if you sin. I didn't know any of this stuff. No one taught me any of this stuff. But I found out if you sin, then Satan has legal right to kill, steal, and destroy in your life. And boy, does he do a good job. Like right now, what you're doing, all this stuff you're sowing, wow, you're going to reap, man. I feel really sorry for you but Satan sometimes will reward. I noticed Satan rewarded Howard Stern after he did some of the things he did. So you might get a reward from Satan, but you don't want that reward. If you notice in the Howard Stern movie, as Howard was getting his reward and AC/DC came and they were singing after he prevailed in New York, and beat down the business people that wanted to kick him out in their own self-righteousness. I mean, they got him there because of his ratings were good. And so once I realized that he was just a credent and just vile, which I like Howard. See, Howard has something on which the church has, is honesty. He gets people to be honest about their sin, but only, unfortunately, his honesty leads them down a path of it's okay to sin. Where in Christianity, the same thing's supposed to happen. We're supposed to confess our sins to one another and be honest about it to lead us down God's path. So you see the difference? But I do think it's a beautiful thing that Howard's honest. But he's honest in the fact that he's honest with his sin, and then that makes it okay for others to sin. So anyway, Satan just loves Howard Stern because he's doing his will even though he's not worshiping. He's not actually doing a satanic worshiper, but he's doing his will, and it's the same thing. It's just like all these babies being aborted. First you break the one commandment, which is sex without marriage, then you break the next, then you have this product that you produce, then you offer it up as a human sacrifice, an abortion, a blood sacrifice to Satan. But you don't know that you're actually doing the will of Satan. You don't know that you're doing it, but it's a blood sacrifice to Satan, and it's going to bring judgment on this country, and it already has. In this country, China's like destroying us. Just eating us alive. I mean, if you look at our national debt, only a fool would not see that this country is terminal. National debt clock. Only a fool. Do you realize this? We're going $1 million in debt every 30 seconds. This is like blood. This is like blood. And the only way you're going to stop this is you stop the 1 million sacrifices to Satan and abortion in a year. Look at that. Just 30 seconds, $1 million in debt. This is a train wreck that's on its way that even Trump didn't even touch. And I still believe that Trump has a chance still to win this election, even though it's what is this, November? Because it's definitely, without a doubt, God's will. Because Trump was China was just ripping us off. Trump's a businessman. And you need a businessman running this country because it's a business. And even with Trump president, he didn't slow this down at all. Not even, it just didn't touch it. He did everything he could try and it didn't touch it. Because you've got to fix the sin. For example, in 1920, 100 years ago, they started listening to radio, which spoke. It was a voice, just like Satan had spoke to Eve in Genesis, and she heard that voice, and it totally changed. They went from life to death, from the kingdom of God into dominion, with Satan having dominion over all humanity, because he didn't have dominion until they sinned. So God was on the way by working on the Supreme Court to reverse Roe versus Wade, because it's a satanic sacrifice to Satan. And so anyway, we're talking about Howard Stern. He's having his AC/DC concert where, it's like a reward from Satan. But Satan, didn't his firstborn child be born during the AC/DC concert? And was that when his child died? I can't remember. I'd have to rewatch the movie again. But was that like Satan coming taking his firstborn child? Like a blood sacrifice, like an offering? Her water breaks during the AC/DC concert. No, I can't remember if they had the baby or if the baby died. I can't remember. Maybe they actually had the kid. But I do remember one of her babies died. But he didn't get to enjoy that AC/DC concert. That was like his pinnacle, his reward. He didn't get it. And Satan is good at stealing like that, And if anybody should know, it's me. I lived in sin from 1994 to 2008. Then I slowly slowed the sin down, and I think I have it stopped. I hope. But sin's a very powerful thing, and this country needs to repent. And because Satan will bankrupt you. I watched Satan bankrupt me. He destroyed me in every way. He bankrupted me in every way possible, and I didn't know how this stuff worked. I didn't know this stuff. I had no clue. But he's going to bankrupt this nation the same way. It doesn't matter whether it's a person or a nation. But see how long. I've already been recording for an hour and 20 minutes. I can't do this too much longer. I'm actually supposed to be in bed. I'm not even supposed to be awake. I mean, to think, it says, but I used to think exactly like they do for decades. See, I don't believe anything that anyone else believes. I don't believe anything because of what other people believe. I had all my own supernatural experiences, and God backs up. If somebody says something, God will back it up. Like, I've had so many supernatural experiences. I mean, I've had visions. I've had God speak to me in an audible voice. I've even been healed. I remember I was about 20 years old, and see, all this stuff's happened outside of church, which is, I did see a vision of Jesus inside church, and what was amazing is Jesus looked just like, I saw Jesus in a vision, and I saw Jesus in a vision probably that was about 40 years ago also. See, what's it called? Trying to think. the Shroud of Turin. Oh, I didn't spell it right. Now, I just gave you something there to try to judge me on. Hey, I'm not going to lie. I look at chicks. I'll sit there and look at a chick on this video right now, right here, right now. I just watched this chick's video right here. I like beautiful women. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing really wrong with that. I mean, you can sin if you think about sexual thoughts. I mean, I was so disciplined on sins that even when I went in strip bars, I didn't even think about having sex with the girls. That's how much of a Christian I was. So even when I went to a strip bar, a chick could be sitting there dancing totally nude, and I'm being completely honest. I have no reason to lie. I'm not like some evangelist. Nobody knows who I am. I'm not known in the Christian world. No one watches any of my videos, and I don't really care one way or another. I could care less. Now, if God starts using me and I move into God in a powerful way, if people dig up all this stuff, I won't like that, but it's the truth. Am I going to lie about it? About the things I did in the past? I mean, obviously, what this person don't understand is that only a witch digs up somebody's sins in the past. That's what a witch does. A witch or a warlock, and that's what they do. Only a witch or a warlock. A witch will take dead things like a dead frog, a dead bird, dead this. It's got to be something dead, you know? Then she'll take all these dead things from bones to this and that, all these creepy, dead, nasty things. She'll put them in a pot and she'll brew that stuff. And then she'll make a potion. And that is what witches and warlocks do on a spiritual level. And the only way you can dig up dead things is to, like, for example, if you want to talk about Trump, you go back to where he said he grabbed a putty tat. But that stuff, if you repent of something, then God takes it as far as the east is from the west. Now, if somebody digs in a graveyard, per se, in the pits of hell or wherever these things go, and digs them back up, well, that makes them a witch or a warlock. And then they make a potion or spell, and then they put that back in the atmosphere, and then people hear that, and it puts a spell on their mind. And what it does is it makes other people who are sick, only sick people will do it. And even some of the people that are well, if they're predisposed to seeing a person in that image, they'll be susceptible to that potion if it's strong enough. Well, most Christians are subject to this, but they'll put that in their mind, and then they'll see that person through that witchery, that witchcraft of digging up something from the past, resurrecting something from the dead. Now God resurrects us from the dead, right? But people like this resurrect that which is dead in trespasses and sins. Like in the Old Testament, they would take the blood. A real Christian, and you don't see too many of those nowadays, a real Christian will not, like if you see Jesus in the Bible, the woman that had 5 husbands, you don't see him condemning her. You see the complete opposite. You see him going up to her and acting like she's valuable, that she's special enough that he knows about her life. And she felt special. She like, this prophet knows, God knows me? So she did not feel condemned at all. Matter of fact, she felt the complete opposite. She felt overjoyed that a prophet of Israel visited her, and a prophet of Israel, she didn't know it was the Son of God. She found that out later. She was just overjoyed that a prophet would give her the time of day, because the Jews would treat other nations like they were lepers. And then God had to come down and give Peter a vision about the Gentiles, and he said, what God has cleansed, do not call common. But this guy right here is a witch or a warlock. Well, since he's a male, he's obviously a warlock. He's dragging up these things that they could actually be weaknesses in Christians, because they have them. Faults and weaknesses in Christians. And he's putting an image out there of them through a word and a belief system of a dead heart, a dead spiritual person that cannot see. Like I know Paula White I can judge her correctly. He cannot. I know that when Paula White spoke, the tangible presence came into my house about 10 years ago. But then I also know that Paula White blocked me on Twitter on one of those critical times of my life, and it could have destroyed me. But I don't hold people. I know that everyone that is whether they're Christian or non-Christian, are human. Everyone's human. There is no Jesus person walking around. And I know that. I'm not stupid. And if there is a Jesus type person that's walking around, he'll be what he is. God said, I am what I am. Now, people can say that they're some great Christian or this or that, but that doesn't mean anything. The Bible says you will know them by their fruit. Now, fruit is the thing they produce. Like if I go into work, I'll be honest with you. I go into work, if somebody pisses me off, if that infects me, and I used to be one of the most infectious problem persons in the world. I was like the spiritual boy in the bubble, that anything anybody did to me infected me. I was subject to any infection. I was like the boy in the bubble in the hospital that has no immune system. Well, as a Christian, I had no immune system against spiritual attacks of any kind, even the smallest of things. I was pissed or upset or wanted to wish bad on somebody from the smallest of things. I was that sick. And even in this day and time, if somebody does something to me, like I saw somebody did something to me at work about 4 weeks ago, and it almost made me quit my job. And I was going to write them up and everything, and God kept me from writing them up. And even though I know that you reap whatever you sow, like Oral Roberts, he built his ministry. He was not like me. He was totally opposite. More of a sociopath type mind in my book, with no conscience. Very logical, like a Vulcan, like you see on Star Trek. He just knew that whatever he sowed, he would reap. So if somebody did evil to him on a logical, like Vulcan type thing, he's like, well, if that person does evil to me, that's an opportunity for me to do good, and I'll sow good, and I'll reap whatever I sow. And that's exactly what he did. So his ministry just exploded. But he didn't understand that he became great because he had a sociopathic type mind that had no conscience, that just did logical things. He didn't. Now, I know these things, but most Christians don't have a clue. If any, probably no Christians out there even understand these things. But I have the gift of understanding, so of course I understand these things. But Jesus did too. Jesus shows the keys in the Bible. There's a rich man that comes to him that rejects him. But Jesus knows how to play the game, because Jesus knew everybody and was wise as, just so wise. It's just when they spoke at him, they said, "No man speaks like this man. No man speaks like this man." And I didn't realize that until I saw the vision of Jesus, and I was getting ready to go to this Shroud of Turin. When I saw the vision of Jesus, they actually made a manifestation of the Shroud of Turin, and I honestly don't even believe in the thing, but the only reason I believe in it is because when I saw the vision of Jesus, I think they made a plaster image of it. Here it is. Oh, there it was right there. They made a plastic image of it. There it is right
They
there.
explain?
They made a plastic image of the shroud, and that's the person I saw in my vision. And I didn't even know about the Shroud of Turin. Probably didn't know about it. I probably had the vision of Jesus back in about 40 plus years ago, and I didn't know about the shroud till about I'd say about 2008. So I never saw it, but after I saw it, I knew this could be real, not because of anything they've said, but because I remember the face that I saw, and it was this face here. It was long, just like this face, except the eyes were open that I saw. And I looked into his eyes, and when I looked into his eyes, I saw an intelligence that I've never seen in any human being. So it was easy for me to understand the Bible, how they said, no man speaks like this man. When I looked into his eyes in that vision 40 years ago, I saw an intelligence, and I'm not stupid, you know. I might have attention deficit disorder and been kind of like in my own little world most of my life, but I even know how all that works probably more than most human beings on the earth. It's so simple for me now to understand the human mind. It's very simple for me. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw an intelligence, and I knew he knew everything about me. And I didn't even know that much about Jesus when I saw him in the vision. I knew some, but not much. I knew a little bit. But I saw him in the vision, and I saw in his eyes. And then later in life, I read in the Bible, how he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And I know what I saw. It was not a man. Of course, he had he was in the image of a man, looked like this here, but he was not a man. Because I could tell by looking into his eyes that he was a God. Because his intelligence level was off the scale, and his emotions, nobody loves like this guy did. Nobody cared about me like this guy did. Nobody had what was inside this guy, because it was not a man. That's why they said no man speaks like him. And of course I know that because of what I saw. And I've had so many revelations. I've had a lot of different revelations. And I've even had a time revelation, which wasn't only witnessed by me, but it also explains Genesis. It makes Genesis very simple to understand. But once again, about 40 years ago, when all this stuff was going down, I've talked about this in some of my other videos. I was praying, and I'm like a whole heart type person. I'm either completely in sin or completely for God. Of course, right now I'm more lukewarm state. I've never been like that before, but that's okay. But doing the best I can do right now, considering the circumstances of everything I've went through, but I'm not even going to get into all that crap. But the things is going a lot better, so I can't complain. But 40 years ago, I was praying, and I felt time slow down. And I thought, well, I didn't know anything about Christianity, and I've never heard too many Christians talk about it, but I felt time slow down, and I thought, well, that maybe it's just something you feel when you pray. So I'm praying again, and I'm in the car with a buddy that he's driving, I'm in the passenger seat. I'm praying because I like the way it feels. I like the way it feels when you connect with God. So I'm praying, and I really powerfully connect. You know, when Jacob stole the birthright, he didn't get it, in a good way, but he got it. And when he did, he leaned down and he was connected. Angels were ascending and descending. He called the place Bethel. But the place wasn't Bethel. The place that was Bethel was him. He had got the birthright. He got the promise. He got the connection between him and God. So I had gotten born again by accident and I got that connection. And, was just praying and powerfully connected. And time slowed down. My buddy was driving. And when time slowed down, I didn't know, but my friend was involved in this portal of time slowing down. So he felt it, and in a panic, he looks over at me and he's like, "Why is time slowing down?" I mean, he didn't say it like that. He was like in a panic. I mean, he was freaking out. So as soon as I stopped praying, I disconnected from praying and looked over at him. As soon as I disconnected from praying, then time resumed. And I didn't know what any of this stuff meant 40 years ago. But as time went on, God started showing me what that revelation was about. And what it was about was what I believe. In Genesis, you have Adam and Eve in a garden, which is like angels. They don't have sex. They don't have any children. They didn't have one children. They were like angels in heaven. Remember, Jesus said, you'll be like the angels in heaven. Well, they were connected to the kingdom because they didn't sin. But you also had another group in Genesis where he said, be fruitful and multiply. So you got one, which is the fossil record on earth that we all see, which you could call the Gentiles, I guess. I'm no theologian. I know nothing about, I don't even read the Bible hardly. I should, but I don't. But you have two creation stories. One, and they're in the Garden of Eden acting like angels, which the Bible I know does say, calls them the sons of God, had relations with the daughters of men. But anyway, you have one, which is the fossil record. They're living and dying. God said, be fruitful and multiply. So they're kind of going through an adaptation. I wouldn't call it evolution per se. I'd call it more natural selection type evolving, First they're starting out with, simple tools, and then they evolve and they create some of these great cities eventually as they grow and modernize. But what's interesting is I'm wondering if these people, this is the first time I ever had this thought, since they weren't the sons of God, they probably became spiritual, and they wanted to spiritually connect. And I wouldn't be surprised if Satan moved in and they were connecting with, that's when they built probably a lot of these pyramids and stuff before, I don't know. But the Sphinx and some of these things, I think, was before a lot of these things. But they might have helped open up the portal of Satan on earth by spiritually seeking spirituality. But I'm just kind of guessing on that one. But what I am saying is that when Adam and Eve sinned, which, well, I don't even know how many years ago it was, that if you follow the lineage, what was it, like 6,000 years ago? I don't even know. Not that it's that important. But when they sinned, that's when it's like time began for them. As soon as they sinned, they entered into time. All of a sudden, God says to them, "Where art thou?" Because all of a sudden, boom, they stepped outside of no time. They were in a dimension where either time was slowed down, because that was my revelation, time was slowed down. It wasn't stopped, but it was very much slowed down. I mean, very much so. And I would imagine if something existed in that dimension that I was in, that they wouldn't age. But I only walked in that not very long in my Christian life, so. But I imagine if a Christian could walk in that, they wouldn't age. Which ain't no big, which is quite possible. But you'd have to really walk with God, almost like Enoch in the Bible, that completely walked with God. There was only 3 people that were taken in the Bible: Enoch, Elijah, and Jesus. All of them really walked with God, and they were all taken out of this world. Maybe, I just thought of something. Maybe there's going to be a 4th. Huh. I wonder who the 4th is going to be. Or maybe there's only going to be 3. Who knows? But anyway, if you look at, as I looked at that, I noticed that when the sons of God saw the daughters of men, which were the people that were on the earth that were living and dying, when the 2 species merged, all of a sudden their lifespan got cut down to 120 years. When before it was like 2,000 years. They were living 1,000 or 2,000 years. So it was interesting when they merged. The 2 merged, that their lifespan really shortened. I find that interesting. And then I also found it interesting when God called Abraham, he separated him from everyone else. And that's where you got the Jewish nation. They were separate from all the other nations, right? So it's like God's trying to reverse what happened in Genesis when the 2 merged. Then God says to Abraham, "Be separate." Then from Abraham, he resurrects Sarah's seed. And most Christians don't even have a clue. Like the Catholic worship Mary, thinking there was some holy thing about Mary. Mary wasn't holy on the fact that she was, 12 to 14 years old. And most people are fairly pure at that age. What was pure about Mary was the seed that was resurrected from Sarah, because her seed was dead. A woman at a certain age, your egg dies. So the first resurrection was the resurrection of Sarah's seed. And no Christian taught me any of this stuff. Anything that I'm saying, no Christian taught me any of this stuff. I didn't learn this from watching TBN or anything of that nature. This is just revelation. So anyway, Sarah's seed got passed up to Mary, and then God joined his seed with it, the Holy Spirit, and then you had this new creation of a man. And then what's interesting, this new creation, after he gets his resurrected body, then can pop through buildings and just appear. He can just enter into a room without the door even being open. Which wouldn't be surprising if Adam and Eve, before the fall, like Paul always refers to them as flesh. I'm just wondering if they had a glorified body more like an angel, and then when they fell, they became flesh. That's just my theory. It's just a theory. The only evidence I have is a guy named Tony Kemp from Sid Roth, who had a revelation. There's a guy named Tony Kemp. You can research it if you want to, but click on television. The reason I like this show is because I've had a lot of revelation, and it's the only thing that is on my level. I haven't watched TBN for years and years and years, but it was good at the time and season. But I need something that's got some power to it. So this is pretty much the stuff that I listen to. And I've had a lot of the same experiences as a lot of these people have had. So there's not too much that surprises me that happens to them. Even though a lot of them went way deeper than I have, I drifted into sin for a long time. But even when I came out of sin, like one time I came out of this horrible sin, and I go into a church, and I'd been living in really bad sin. I mean, if the Christians knew it in that church, they would have just treated me like a leper, a super leper. But they didn't know about it. So I was in church, and God says He prefers whether you be hot or cold. So I was hot. They were probably lukewarm. Even though I just got finished sinning for who knows how long. So I go into the church service, and I'm hot. I'm on fire for God. Of course, just being around them started to put me out, to be honest with you. But before they could put me out, start to turn me into lukewarm like them, before they could do that, the power of God fell on me. And it fell on me. I mean, I never felt anything like that before. I felt like I was a god. And I don't say that to glorify myself, because I got to feel what it was like to be Jesus. And I tell you what, when it falls on you, you feel like you're a God, not the God, but a God. I mean, you really feel that way because you are what you are. And it's not a shame to say that, because it's not you, it's the presence that falls on you. So when I was in that church service, I knew that all I had to do was raise my hand up, and I could have healed anybody or anything. There was a power there that was just unreal. I mean, it was a superpower. And I was quite surprised by it. I was like, wow. And it was just a superpower. And I just came out of sin. But the funny thing about it is the blood, when Jesus washes you, it's just like what He says to Peter. He says, what God has cleansed, call not common. Who was I going to bring up here? I completely forgot what I was talking about here. I was going to type in somebody. Oh, Tony Kemp. Tony Kemp had a revelation like mine. Or no, he went to heaven and he saw this book that was open. Here it is here. But he saw, you can look, I think it's April 11th, 2016. But Tony went to heaven, and which I never have. I almost one time felt myself going up, but it scared me half to death. So I was like, no way. But I was preaching. I used to preach in a little tape recorder, because that's how my spiritual gift works. The more I use it, the more information I get. And I recorded like 10,000 hours of information on just different things. Most of it on how the mind works and spiritual things, on how they work. Secret of law of attraction and how all that really works. And just all kinds of interesting things. But, see, I figure out the real truth on why things work. The law of attraction works because you're either attracting angels or demons, and I've already talked a little bit about that, but anyway, Tony got pulled into heaven, and saw a book open in a library in heaven, and he started reading it, and it said that when Moses went up the mount, time was suspended. And see, I already had my own revelation 40 years ago about time, So it did not surprise me. Now there's no now Tony Kemp doesn't know me. He doesn't know the things that I know. And it didn't surprise me when he said that. And I just figured he'd figure out the secret in Genesis, but I don't know if he ever did. About how Adam and Eve didn't live in time. See, time is a dimension that Albert Einstein just figured out that we live in, that we actually live in a dimension of space, not just space, but time. And see, God can easily control that dimension. And Adam and Eve, they didn't live in time. That's the secret why there's a fossil record. Of mankind living on the earth, because they were living and dying while Adam and Eve never died once. You won't find Adam and Eve's fossil record until they finally died, but they were probably alive for the hundreds of thousands of years that man were living and dying, keeping the earth. They were in the garden keeping it, but God knew that they would fail. He knew that they would fall, and he had to have the earth kept by them as a backup plan, because he knew they would fall, and the earth would be a mess if it wasn't being kept by them. See, God has everything planned, just like I said on the wall, the statement by John F. Kennedy: things don't happen, things are made to happen. Everything happens by design. There's nothing that God does by design. From the fact that the King James Version, they didn't know anything about DNA, that they had the word God is in the King James Version of the Bible 4,444 times, and DNA is made up of 4 letters. I mean, it's like God playing a little joke, but he hides everything. That's what he does. And even I've talked to Christians that seem to be Christians for a long time, and they have no clue that God hides things. He hides things in nature. He hid the galaxies out there. We didn't know that there were galaxies out there until we got some of the most powerful telescopes or sensors that we remember talking about sensors. That's how a Christian has. A Christian has a sensor that's born again. That's how he knows these things. It's just a sensor. Now, it's a spiritual sensor, but it's a sensor the same, no different than what we create on Earth, whether it be a telescope that can see galaxies. And we didn't know there were galaxies out there until finally they got a really powerful enough telescope to realize that that's not a star, that's a galaxy. Then we didn't even know there were black holes till Albert Einstein theorized it. And how did Albert Einstein figure it out? Well, he got honest. And that was the one time I almost got transported to heaven. I was preaching and I said, I hit on the word honesty, and it was dealing with the guy. Remember the guy that got caught for showing his penis that was running for president, or I don't know what he was. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's about to show his penis or something, and he showed his penis to somebody on, I don't know if it was on the internet or something. He got busted, and it wrecked his political career. But there was something, I was preaching something, it's on some recording back in 2010 on some tape somewhere in my house, on all these tapes I'd made. But I was preaching on it, and when I hit the word honesty, I felt gravity totally disappear. And it was the strangest feeling. It's just like when I experienced time slowing down. And I got the kind of, like, God always has a witness of things, 2 or 3 witnesses. So my 2 witnesses was one, I experienced time slowing down, which was witness number 1. Number 2 witness, when this guy that didn't even know I was praying in the car, he says to me, time is slowing down. And then the 3rd witness, by 2 or 3 witnesses, is when Tony Kemp had this revelation. He said when Moses went up on the mountain, time was suspended. because he was up there, 80 days or 120 days, I don't know how many days it was, but he didn't have any food or water. So how in the world did he exist without food or water? That's not possible. But time was suspended, and it just doesn't surprise me after what I've experienced. So anyway, I was preaching in this tape recorder, and when I hit the word honesty, see, the reason you're condemning these people, well, maybe you think you're being honest. Maybe you actually think you understand these people. Now, I'm a better judge of someone like Paula White than you are, because I judge in truth. You just judge on the spiritual DNA that's like perhaps your own spiritual DNA, because Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead. So you can see dead in Christians, which there is. There's a spiritual death in DNA in every single Christian alive, including me. I can go to work right now and I could go off on somebody. I could get mad by if they do something evil to me, I'm infected by that evil, and then I react back. Now, we're not supposed to do that as Christians, but I went through a lot of shit in the last few years, and yes, I said shit. I went through a lot of shit, and Moses in the Bible, he was going through a lot of crap, after they got cursed for... most Christians don't understand that Israel ended up 400 in Egypt because they sinned. For example, Satan had the prince of the land sleep with one of their daughters. They got irate, self-righteous. They murdered the tribe, and they sought vengeance of their own. They murdered innocent blood. God, immediately there was famine in the land, which always happens. Just like the famine that happened in the 1920s when radio was speaking and everyone was changing its image. You had the Dust Bowl, the heart of the United States, which represents the heart. Remember, Jesus said the heart is ground. So in the 1920s, the heart of the nation just blows up in the air and everyone's breathing it in. 100 so years ago. Because radio, by speaking, transformed a nation into its image. So by the end of 1929, when radio had reached every household, then you had the Great Depression, which was a judgment on the land. Then they still didn't repent, so then the Antichrist tried to emerge, and Hitler. Then you had a world war, and if Hitler would have got if he would have been a little bit more patient and got nuclear bombs, well, this world would be a totally different place. There would be no YouTube. There would be nothing. It'd be totally communist rule, and that could very well have happened if he rose up. But most likely the Antichrist would have appeared in him or through him, but he was very powerfully seeking the occult, and but it didn't go that way. Instead, we got the bomb that Hitler was trying to develop with rockets and everything else, and it wasn't an accident that God birthed this nation 400 years ago, that we landed on Plymouth Rock November 11th. Just this past November 11th was 400 years since it happened. And 400 years ago, they brought the disease over that killed 90% of the Indians. And now it's kind of funny that 400 years later, we're wearing masks fighting a disease called COVID. Sometimes you reap some of the stuff you sow. This disease that is happening right now could be an ancient curse that we put on the Indians by bringing disease to them. Even though we did it unknowingly, we still did it. And even 100 years ago, do you realize that in 1920, it was in 1620, 400 years ago, that we brought disease to the Indians, and then in 1920, in the 20s, we had the Dust Bowl where they were wearing masks also. Like if you look at any images from the 1920s, Dust Bowl in the 1920s, you'll see people wearing masks, and they were a heck of a lot more thicker than what we have. See if we can find some images. Look, here's an image of the mask they were wearing back in the 1920s. But isn't it crazy? It was 100 years ago we were wearing masks. But radio changed the image of a nation, and our image keeps getting more corrupt and corrupt, losing our Christian values. And I'm not saying that Christian churches are perfect, because they are not. Satan's always trying to infect them, just like he infected the church when Jesus came, and they totally rejected him. Well, Satan's in every single church. He attacks it harder than anything else. And he's even using you to attack it as a warlock, digging up things of the past. And I know you don't know these things, but in heaven, Satan is accusing 24 hours a day, trying to get legal right to kill, steal, and destroy on the earth. But you don't know about these things. You can only know about these things by revelation. And you can easily dig up anything on me in the past. It's not, there's so much about me. I mean, you could have a field day with that. But it doesn't matter. Because God knows why I did everything I did, and I even know why I did everything I did, and maybe I'll explain it someday to help other people. But it doesn't matter what anyone has done in the past. Moses was a murderer. King David murdered. But God said of King David, from your lineage all the kings will come, and from your lineage Christ will even come. So it matters what God thinks, not what you think. Being spiritually dead and atheist, speaking from death, doing the will of Satan, being a condemner and a judger, because that's all Satan does. That's what he does. He judges because he's mad because he didn't get forgiveness of sins. He has a totally destructive passion. He has a passion upon passion to judge man because they got forgiveness of sins. It's just something, he just drives him nuts. But we didn't have the revelation that he had, just like the children of Israel that came out of Egypt that heard God speak thunders from a mountain. We didn't have that revelation like that, so we're not judged. And I'm glad that I don't have too many revelations. A lot of my revelations were 40 years ago. But I have had some revelations. I had when Paula White spoke and the tangible presence came in God, I had that revelation. And I've had a lot of things happen. I mean, I can have something from God every day if I want it, if I desire it, if I draw near to Him. But anyway, that's all my own personal business and nobody else's business. And it's definitely not your business. But if you want to stalk me, that's because that's what Satan does. If you want to stalk my life, that's what Satan does. He's a stalker. You know, I've seen girls that have been raped, and they get raped time and time again by strange people that they don't even know. But they'll get raped again and again because Satan stalks them. He seeks to enter into people to rape them. I've seen it do it. I've seen him do it time and time again through certain girls. They'll get raped by a brother or a dad, and then maybe an uncle, and then even a strange boyfriend that they date will rape them. It's very interesting how Satan stalks. But it wouldn't surprise me if he starts stalking me. But it ain't going to give me no glory like it does attaching yourself to these other Christians that you want to defile and put judgment on. You're doing what Satan what the opposite of what God, the high priest in the Bible, would take the sins off of the people and put it on an animal. You're doing the opposite. You're bringing condemnation and judgment on the Christian, and you're trying to defile them. And that's all Satan does. So you say you're an atheist, but in all actuality, you're working for Satan, but you don't know that. But hey, we all do stuff like that and don't know it. That's why Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Just like all the abortions are child sacrifice to Satan. But anyway, I need to go to bed. I wasn't supposed to be up. Just happened to click and see your video and decided to respond, and looks, if I want to do a psychological DNA on you, Satan tempted Jesus with fame. And I look at the views you have. You have 31,000 views. In 2.5 hours. So you're doing it for not only the fame of it, you like feeling superior. You think you're superior. I have a feeling that someone belittled you. That's what I think. Some Christians belittled you. You were probably starting to have some emerging spiritual gift or intelligence, and they belittled your intelligence. And all of this is a manifestation of your heart to get back, or someone hurt you. Do you realize that Hitler attacked the Jews because they took away his gift? He wanted to be an artist. I just have a feeling, because see, it's not hard to see the spiritual DNA. Like you're looking inside the mind of an evangelist. It's not hard for me, who understands spiritual DNA. I was going to write a book about it. Somebody on Sid Roth actually beat me to it. And I wasn't very happy about that. But they use the exact same scriptures God gave me. I mean, to a T. Which didn't surprise me at all. And of course, I don't know this person, but they use the exact scriptures that God gave me. Exact scriptures. But if I look at you and look at your spiritual DNA, that's what I see. I see a person that is doing this for the fame, doing this for the attention, doing this because you have a lust for it. And that lust has to be driven by some original seed. Something happened to you. Somebody who had a spiritual evil DNA, and I've been attacked by church people too. So it's not hard for me to understand that. I mean, I was going to be a minister, and some legalistic Christian who was as sick as the scribes and Pharisees were almost in Jesus' day, attacked me, even though I had a good spiritual gift. Belittled me. He belittled me. He attacked me. And it wasn't him, it was quite a few of them. Because see, when you're valuable to God, you're probably valuable to God. You probably have some special gift that would value the Christian world. And some Christian probably devalued you because Satan used them. Just like Satan used Peter, which was the closest friend, almost one of the closest friends Jesus had other than John, because it was Peter, James, and John that Jesus trusted enough to show him the revelation of his in the Mount of Transfiguration. So I have a feeling that you're actually valuable to God, very valuable, and that Satan has turned the tables and is using you as a warlock, digging up past sins and sick fruits that you see in Christians, and that's not too hard to do. But that's what I think. And if you keep going this way, you'll change deeper and deeper into that image. The Bible says, "Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind." And that doesn't come natural. What comes natural is our nature that we got from Satan in Genesis. He deliberately changed our nature, our spiritual DNA. And he didn't totally turn our nature toward evil, but kind of put us right in the middle where we can choose between one or the other. We can either choose the low road and the weaker impulses, like Abraham Lincoln said, "May the better angels rise in us." Well, we can either be gods, we can think like Jesus, and love and treat people right, or we can give way to our lower impulses, that is our old nature, other nature. And as we yield to that nature, the funny thing about it is you feed on that fruit like a vampire, you become more of a vampire. It's almost like in the movie Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, where he didn't want to totally lose all of his humanity, so he tried not to kill human, tried to feed on rats, because he didn't want to lose that humanity. And what was so interesting is that the other vampires valued him because they were totally dead, and to be alive they had to be around him, because it was the only way they could feel a bit of what it was like to used to be alive, you know. So as you move into this stuff and get deeper in it, you're going to transform man into the image, and there's going to reach a point where it's going to be very hard to ever come back. And you're already hooked on it. Satan has you hooked. He's got the fame, just like the temptation of Jesus, where tempted him with fame. You got the fame. You got 31,000 views in 2 hours. So he's got you hooked. So I don't think you can turn back. You know, the only thing that's going to turn you back is all hell breaking loose in your life. But Satan's probably not going to want that to happen, you know. Very interesting. All I know is I would not want to be you. That's all I know, because the bottom line is you reap whatever you sow. If you sow corn, you sow corn. You sow weeds, you're going to reap. And I don't think you're going to pull out of this. I mean, you can. But there's no way you had to have had some supernatural experience that you knew was of God. See, Satan, Trump, in his own ego, what we're going through right now is a breaking point. If this stuff doesn't break Trump, that's what this is about. What's going on right now, what you don't understand, is that God is trying to get Trump to turn to him by all of this evil happening. This is an accumulation to break Trump to where he'll turn to God. And then he'll be a different president the next 4 years. Because he's strong in his own self, and I know the secret on a psychological level on why Trump is strong. It's there's nothing that's a minister to me, and I'm not going to reveal the secret here for even a second, because I have a very short time where I can retire and write plenty of New York Times bestseller books on how the mind works and how anyone can be the president of their own life. You do understand that you write the own story of your own life. You're writing it every breath you take, every move you make. You're writing your own story. Now, Satan, if you're doing his will, well, you're writing his story, which is obviously what you're doing. And you're going to reap what you sow. That's just going to happen. So, it says you used to think like them. That means you're an atheist. You don't even believe at all. Well, that's bizarre. I could never, ever be an atheist. I mean, I can be a sinner, which is what I was. But I could never be an atheist. I'm amazed that you could be an atheist. That just baffles me, but I don't know. There's some people that just don't have real God encounters. I mean, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. From time slowing down to almost the gravity disappearing as I hit on the word honesty, to revelation, to I mean, I could probably click on Sid Roth right now and God might even speak to me. It's not uncommon at all. It's not uncommon at all.
Yeshua is not for us.
Oh!
And it's not
In the death and resurrection of Him. If you want to do that right now, I want you to pray. Dear Jesus, dear Jesus.
Somebody blesses the Jewish people.
That said, the power of God hit me in a lazy boy chair. I was instantaneously sobered off the drug, and I was called to preach the gospel. I would love to say that.
See, real Christians they have real experiences that they just can't deny. I mean, I'll tell you about one of my experiences. I went to a Baptist church, which I don't recommend us going to Baptist churches, but I started more of an independent one. But God was definitely in that. I mean, you could feel God very powerfully in the church. And there was a lot of good Christians in that church. And God was definitely there. I mean, He'd speak to me all the time through the ministers that would come through there. I mean, there was no doubt. But I didn't even have all my experiences in church. They were very rare that I had experiences in church, even though I did have them in church too. But one of the powerful things that dealt with my attention deficit disorder, which is very, very powerful, it can change your life. But I know it now as more of a spiritual thing. I understand all these things. But it manifested in a vision, and I didn't even know what a vision was. But I was a very strong little Christian. Like I said, I had lots of revelations from time slowing down and seeing Jesus in a vision, different things a long time ago. And Yeah, this will be the last thing I'm going to share. I don't got any more time. But there was a guy named Demas Sharan, I think was his name. He's a member of the Full Gospel Businessman International. I was listening to him, I guess, on TBN or something. I don't know. I don't remember. But he got on my radar, and there was something I liked about him, because he had the real thing, the full gospel experience, and there's something I liked about him, and for some reason I was moved to give him $500, and I was just a kid. $500 was a lot of money, and they didn't even ask for me to give any money. I just gave it because I just had faith. I just trusted in God, so I gave $500, and I didn't even know they prayed for me, but obviously they did, because the next thing that happened was I was in my bedroom and I had a vision. Actually, it started out as a dream, and I was going down this road of this dream, and everything was all foggy, which I know today was the attention deficit disorder. So I don't want to give away too many secrets on this. So I'm going down this road, and everything's foggy. Then all of a sudden, the fog just clears, and everything becomes crystal clear. What's interesting about this vision is things were more real in the dream than they are in real life. Now, if you talk to anybody that's actually gone to heaven, they'll say the exact same thing. They'll say this place, the reality of this place is pale compared to heaven. Like there's 80 more colors. Their vision in heaven is superior. Like their eyes work like binoculars. They're hearing, there can be 50 songs playing or even 1,000 songs playing. And just like your eyes can pick out individual objects, in heaven you can pick out individual sounds and listen to one at a time if you want to by your hearing. It's a very interesting place. Plus I hear you have 360-degree vision. This is interesting also. But I don't want to get into all those stories and things of that nature. But anyway, I could see it was more real in this dream than real life, and that's what people that go to heaven say. So anyway, I'm driving along in this dream, and everything becomes crystal clear. The blackness of the night was so sharp and so clear, it was more real than in real life. It's more real than what I'm looking at right now. I mean, it just blows this away. This seems pale and dull compared to that dream and how real it was. So as I'm going down this country road, it was one of my favorite roads that I used to drive down as a kid for peace, and I'm in a dream and I'm going down this road. I'm grabbing the steering wheel and I'm getting real close to it, and I'm like panicking trying to steer. A lot of the revelation that God has been showing me in the last few years are about this vision, about how the mind works and how we try to control everything in life. And really the media speaks to control things. I mean, everything's about control or having power. We lost dominion in Genesis, and I don't want to get into all this stuff. But in Genesis, they didn't have fear, they didn't have worry. And they had dominion and power, which is what you're seeking as you make these videos. That's what you want. Authority and power and fame. And you want to feel intelligent, especially. I mean, that's another one. You get a reward for these things, and that's why you do them, basically. But it's okay. It's no big deal. Because we're all human. But anyway. So I wake up from this dream going down this road, and when I wake up, I can still see this road, even though my eyes are open and I'm totally awake. And I didn't even know what a vision was. I was only 19. I think I was 19 years old. Yeah, I think I was 19. So I just got out of school, I think. So that make that about 43 years ago. So for about 15 seconds, all I could see was this road, even though I had my eyes open. I didn't know what a vision was, or even a dream from God. So it was a dream / vision from God. So I'm sitting on the end of my bed thinking, what the hell just happened? I'm like, what the hell was that? So as I'm sitting on the end of my bed, all of a sudden I feel this electric shock come from above, and it comes down through my body. And I'm like, what was that? It's just like, it felt like an electric shock. It wasn't as bad. I've touched electrical stuff before by accident one time, and it wasn't unpleasant as that type of electric shock, but it still felt like an electrical shock. And I've listened to things on Sid Rock where people, there was this Catholic priest that would pray for people, and they said they'd be hit with like an electrical shock. And there's all been different people say the same thing. So, and I don't know any of these people on Sid Roth. All I know is my own experiences. So, but when I hear other people have the same experiences, just like that one guy I was talking about that had the gift of understanding, that Shane Wall, who he can see angels, and I forgot to tell his story. He can see angels as he's preaching. They just gather all around the church, and then they start flapping their wings violently. So he's like praying. He's like, well, why are they doing that? And he was saying this, when they do that, it's time for an altar call. But I remember the angel one time in my house flapping the wing, and I could hear it, and it was totally, there was no windows open. We had an old house, you can't open the windows. And there was no flue for a bird to be up in the flue to be flapping to make that noise. It was virtually impossible. And there was no one in the house. So I knew it was an angel. Plus I'd heard angels, on quite a few occasions, telling me not to do this or that. And their voices aren't real dominant, but you can hear them. I mean, they don't like overwhelm you, but it's louder than your own voice. And anytime they speak, there's always a fruit of what they speak happens. They're just not speaking idly. But I only saw an angel once. But I feel like getting into all these stories. I'll just tell you this one. But the angel, I guess I'll tell the one time I saw the angel. I had started sinning back in 1994. After July 3rd, I just started sinning, which I was going to last 14 years of sin, which I had no clue, and even longer actually. It's been tough pulling out of that stuff, but God wanted me to keep from going into sin, and so he's going to give me a wife, and he had a. So I'm laying in bed, and I'm half asleep, half awake, which really represented my spiritual state. And I'm glad I didn't squarely see the angel. He was over to my left, and I could kind of see him. And I definitely could hear him. I could hear him more than I could see him, but I saw him. It was the only time I ever saw an angel. I didn't get a good look at him, but I know he was there. He was just out of my vision, but he was there, and he spoke. And he said the appointed time. And I didn't know that was in the Bible. I never heard anyone preach that. I never heard that. Never. But he said the appointed time is now arriving. And I knew he was talking about a girl for me. And I'd prayed for years about getting married. So I go into church, and I'll get back to the other story in a minute about being hit with the electrical shocks. So I go into church the next day, and here's this girl, this new girl. And she's like perfect for me. She plays tennis, like I wanted to be a tennis pro. She plays tennis. Everything about her was a match for me. Her physical attractiveness was perfect, what I was looking for. She was in the choir at church. Everything about her was a perfect match for me, and the sin was too powerful, to be honest with you. I loved it too much. I mean, I loved it with all my heart and my soul. And because I couldn't turn from it, I lost that blessing that God had prepared for me, which would have stopped me from going into years of sexual sin from strip bars and prostitutes and everything else I got involved in. But there was a core reason that broke me down and all that, which I don't expect someone like you to even begin to understand. I don't even expect Christians to understand. But see, if Satan has dominion over your mind, which he had over mine, and I didn't even know it. I didn't know that there was such a thing. But he had dominion over my thoughts, and I never had control to think about what I wanted to. Now, I could resist thinking about sexual thoughts, but other things like fear and worry and things of that nature, I had no power over. And I'm just still struggling a little bit to this day. I mean, I'm not afraid. You can mock me or make videos or do whatever the hell you want. It ain't nothing anybody else ain't done anyway. You can find dirt on me. You can do whatever the hell you want. And you know something? I'm not afraid of it. Because you know something? I know the real truth and the real power. I reap what I sow. You can do whatever the hell you want, punk. To me, you're a punk if you're living for Satan, because that's easy. Punks live for Satan. So you can dig up all the dirt on me you want, and it's easy to find. Others have done it. And I was no angel. But the reason I turned to all this sin was the domination. I spiritually dominated in the mind. You know, Carrie Fisher with electric shock therapy. Whitney Houston took drugs and drowned, and her daughter followed suit and did the same thing. Robin Williams hung himself. I mean, people get depressed. You know, these spiritual dominating spirits are no joke. Just like I showed Robin Williams with that monkey on his back like a demon. You can have a lower level demonic force in you, and you don't even know it. Just like that picture of Robin with that demon on his back. You can have one of those. This whispering to you, controlling you, putting suggestions in your mind, and you don't even know that you think that's your thoughts. I don't think we need to show Robin Williams again, do we? Last pictures of Robin Williams. But you cannot be doing what you're doing now against God's anointed, and yes, some of these people are God's anointed. You cannot be doing what you're doing now if you don't have one of these little babies on your back, whispering in your ear, in your spirit, that you've made covenant with for whatever reason. Because somebody's hurt you, somebody's belittled you, or maybe you're mad at God. You know, I was so mad during the worst time in my life, when I drifted away from God, that I was going through such hell that I would angrily yell out at God like I'm sure some people do in hell itself, because I was in a hell. But you can have one of these little lower level demons with you, riding on your back your whole life. You know, whispering in your ear, and you think it's your thoughts. And thoughts, not a voice. It's not like you're crazy. It's suggestive thoughts that you think are your thoughts. That's how it works. That's why Satan changed our spiritual image, and we were born of his spirit in Genesis. When Eve took his word, she was born of that word. The angels, went from angels to demons because they were born of a word. They were tempted by Satan in some way, And they were born of that, and they became whatever they were born of. They went from angels to demons. It's such a nasty thing. They were almost like the American Indian that were so susceptible to disease that it wiped out 90% of them. They'd never seen disease. And the angels, they never saw the thing that Satan created, the lie, and the manifestations of what he manifested, the darkness that he manifested. They had no defense against it. And he got 1/3 of them, the ones that couldn't resist. But a lot of humans, have these demonic voices, and they don't even know. They're just thoughts, and you think that that's not a demon, but it is. So anyway, going back to this electrical shock thing, after I got hit by electrical shock, after this vision/dream and going down this road where things became crystal clear, represents the mind. The Bible says you have a sound mind, not the spirit of fear. And I gotta get off here. But I tell you what, you can have one of these old demons. They'll break you down. I had a few of these from the spiritual atmosphere that being around my parents. That's what caused it. And if they break you down, man, and then you turn to either drugs or sex or alcohol or whatever. You turn to something for comfort, and you love that stuff that you turn to because it's just, you love it you can love some of that stuff with all your heart and all your soul. Just like you're supposed to love God with all your heart and your soul, you start loving that stuff with all your heart and all your soul. It's very interesting how that works. And then you're just heading down a path down hell, But these little lower level demons that ride on your back, Robin Williams killed himself. He used comedy as like a shield because he was so sensitive to what he was almost empathic to what people thought. So comedy was like a thing that he created his own atmosphere. But then when he was around people and had to be real, then the vulnerable Robin came out. And the things he would sense, he wanted someone to love him like God, obviously, and no person can do that. So I'm sure his wife fell short and maybe even smothered by him. And no one can fulfill that type of void that's created in a person from something that wasn't there, put in by their parents in childhood, that created this void, this black hole in your soul, this dark, black hole swallows light, but you can have a spiritual black hole in your soul that just, nothing can quench it. Nothing can feel that void. Now God can, but that's about it. So someone like Robin can never really be happy. And eventually this lower level demons took his ass out. Took him straight to hell. What I hear. And it's kind of funny, in hell, he thinks he's in a dream. He thinks he's dreaming. That's good in a way. And I came very close to going to hell myself. Went to meet some girl for sex, and 5 guys were there, and they beat me in the head as hard as they could swing. They choked me to try to kill me that way or make me pass out. They tried to get away from him, and I dislocated my shoulder trying to get away from him, and 3 times they put a gun to my head to shoot me, and I passed out, and they left me there for dead, and I very well could have died. But if they'd have shot me, I tried to ask for forgiveness of sins, but I thought, man, that's such a cop-out, asking forgiveness of sins when I went to meet some girl for sex. And here I'm about ready to get killed, and I'm going to ask for forgiveness of sins, and I just couldn't believe God would forgive me. And I tell you what, if they'd have pulled that trigger, I'd be in hell with Robin right now. No doubt. And no one, and when you're there, there's no one. It doesn't matter how much anybody here on earth loves you or cares. You're there, man. You'll be forgotten about. I remember looking at some gravestones. There's a park I like to walk in. There's a nice bike trail, and I like to walk it. It's a beautiful outdoor bike trail in Ohio, and as I walk by, there's over in Taylorsville Park. I guess that's around. I guess right outside of Huber Heights, Ohio. There's a gravestone called the Boers, where a family had died back in. I think some of the graves go back all the way to even the 1790. But I see their graves, I found the Boer graves and graves all in this area. But it's interesting, their graves, they're buried, just a few hundred years ago, and all of their gravestones were etched out in stone, but even their names are being erased by weather. You can't read the gravestones no more. So if you go to hell, everybody that ever knew you is going to forget about you. Every just totally be forgotten, All this stuff that you're doing on YouTube, thinking you're getting attention and fame. These people are sick people that enjoy this kind of stuff, and there has to be something wrong with them if they enjoy mocking some of these people. And I tell you what, some of these people that are ministers that do end up in hell, some of these ministers that you might be calling out as bad ministers, some of them might actually end up in hell. Because I've heard of that too. If they're not careful. It can happen. I mean, I could end up in hell if I'm not careful. But it ain't no joke. They say Michael Jackson's been there, and the demons make him dance, make him do the moonwalk and different things. And they say in hell that Robin is is told to make jokes, but every time he tries to make a joke on the stage, the demons, he feels like about a demon's ready to slam him with something, and he can't get it out. He can't make a joke. That's what I hear, and it sounds like the time when I was almost killed by those 5 guys, how they treated me. It's very similar. The demonic force that was in them, the way they treated me. It just seems too real, what I've heard, to deny it. But there's other guys. There's a guy from my area called, not Howard Stern, but Howard Storm. Howard had died. He was an atheist like what you are now. When Howard died, he didn't believe in God. And next thing you knew, he got up out of his body, and it was dark in the room he was at, and there's people that were bidding him to go. And he didn't know what was going on. They just said, "Follow us, Howard." They were kind of, they weren't being too mean to him or anything of that nature. And so he started following them, and he just kept following them, and he didn't know where they were going. It was kind of dark or something. He didn't know what was going on. So he walked what he felt like was like halfway across the country. He said he was just walking forever. And the more darker and deeper they went down into hell, which he didn't know that's where he was going, the more aggressive they got, the more pushy they got, the more intense they got. And finally, at one point, they just started ripping him to pieces, which is very similar to what they did to Stephen in the Bible, who they looked on like an angel. They just bit on him with their teeth, and they just went crazy attacking him. The scribes and Pharisees did, the religious people. Stephen was transforming almost like an angel. They looked on him like it was an angel, and Christians can do that. It's possible in this world to just transform into powerfully into that image. I hope to do it someday myself. I'm not even at the beginning. Maybe I'm at the very, very beginnings of transformation, but hardly have emerged yet. Like a baby that, the cell divides and goes from one cell to two cells. Maybe I'm there at that point, as far as Christ being formed in me. I know a lot of things, but it's not how much you know. It's how much you become. It doesn't matter if you can preach the best message in the world. It only matters if it sticks with you and it changes you, that spiritual DNA enters into you and you become that. Because you can preach stuff and let it flow right out of your mouth and not remember even what you preached. I've done that 1,000 times. Stuff I've recorded and I don't even know what I've recorded. But I know it was good stuff, but even my YouTube videos I make, I don't remember hardly anything I record, but that's just the spiritual state I'm in, and even my mind, but Howard got ripped to pieces, and the only belief system he had was something about Jesus. He couldn't even hardly remember the words, and in hell he spoke those words, and he noticed if he mentioned God that it drove them crazy, and his enemies in hell would fall back if he spoke that. So it drove them away from him. They stopped ripping him to pieces. And a lot of people think that these are like drug encounters, but these near-death experiences, nothing but the drugs the brain produces, which is just total bullcrap. There's a story in this book right here. It's called Imagine Heaven. And a blind girl who was born blind dies or has a near-death experience, and she sees her body for the first time. And you're talking about a girl that even when she dreamed, because she was born blind, she dreams of feel. Like when she would dream, she had no visual impressions. She never saw ever because she was born blind. So when she dreamed, it was all about feeling things, and that's how she dreamed. There was no visual into her dreaming. So when she has a near-death experience, she sees for the first time, because she never ever saw. She sees her own body. She sees the necklace on her, which she recognized by feel, by the shape of it, by feel. And I forget what else happens, but it's no joke. This stuff's real. To be an atheist makes no sense. I'm going to wrap this up in about 5 minutes. So anyway, going back to the story, where I had those electric shocks after I had that vision and that dream. Electric shock came down through me. And a voice, very subtle. It's amazing how subtle Satan is. But a demon, I'm sure it wasn't Satan himself, but a demon said, that didn't happen. And I wasn't fully awake, even though I was awake. I was fully awake, but I thought, well, maybe I just wasn't awake. So, after the vision, which was one thing, and then the electric shock, which was another thing, finally I thought, no, maybe I just wasn't awake. Maybe this was just a dream, and this electric shock, I just wasn't awake. But there was a voice that spoke to me and said none of that happened. And I believed it. Slick little demonic forces, I tell you, they don't pull nothing past me now, or not too much past me. So I believed it, and then God saw that I believed it, so then God hit me with another electric shock, and I felt it come down through me, and that time I was like, now come on, I know I was awake, I know I experienced that, and I know 40 years later after that vision that I know what it was all about. Even the words that God spoke to me tie into that vision. He spoke to me in an audible voice twice. It all ties together. And it's all about the mind and how the mind works and freeing my mind from the thing that pushed me into sin and caused me to go into sin in the first place. And I didn't know any of this stuff. It's no wonder that people like Abraham are like almost 100 years old. I think he was 99 years old before God can really do anything. Or Moses is like 80 or whatever before God can really use you, because it just takes time to grow the heck up. I'm 62 years old, but I probably have the maturity level of, I don't know, maybe 25-year-old men. I'm just not that mature. But I had ADD all my life, so you don't live in the real world with ADD. You live in your own little matrix, but that's all I'm going to say about that. And everyone lives in a matrix. You live in a matrix. You're an atheist, you say, but that's a matrix that you willingly entered into. But you've got to have something out there that made you believe in God. Otherwise, you wouldn't have wasted your time. Why would you have wasted? You said, I used to think like they did for decades. You wasted decades of your life? There must have been something that made you believe in. You had to have something that made you believe. I mean, I could never become an atheist, ever. Not in a million years. It's just not possible. So I've seen too much. But if you enjoy this video, please consider supporting my work. Well, you're doing a work all right. Manifesting a fruit, which people will eat. And then guess what? When they eat that fruit, the fruit has a DNA seed in it. So they'll change into that image. Yep. Everyone produces something in life. But you can get mad at me if you want to. I don't give a damn. I've had some of the worst trolls in the world come after me. And maybe willingly so. But I just had to say something about all this because I don't approve of what you're doing. And I don't know anything about you. I think I maybe listened to just a little bit of one video. But ain't no sense in... Anyway, that's all I got to say. All I can say is... I guess I gotta pray for you, and because I shouldn't be condemning you, because I sinned. What's worse, what I did or what you're doing? I don't know. But what I do know is you're sowing. You got 31,000 views. You're sowing into a lot of people. At least the things I did, I didn't sow in many fields. But I'm not saying the stuff I didn't do a lot of damage. I mean, you just never know with the damage, the butterfly effect, and the things you do when it comes on a spiritual level. But anything you do, it's not for God, is kill, steal, and destroying. So, just is what it is. But that's the way the world works. You're either speaking words of death or words of life. That's how it works. But I guess I'll say a prayer for you. You know, Jesus, I don't know what the deal is here. You know what the deal is. Obviously, this comes from either ego or hurt, or maybe he feels like you failed him. Maybe he felt like he turned to you and you didn't give him what he wanted. And he's actually mad at you. Or maybe he's mad at Christians because of the evil that is in them. But the bottom line is, like Lou Holt said, it's not what happens to you in life, it's how you react. You know, losers get infected by others, and then they become the image of that which they get infected with. They actually get transformed into that image. And anyone can be a loser. We've all failed. All I can say is God, I mean, he's learned some skills doing this, you know? How to speak. You can still use this guy, and my perception is he must be valuable for you if Satan can convert him to his side. So all I can say is God help him, wake him up. Forgive his sins. Give him a spiritual gift. That's all I got to say. But I don't want to listen too much to your videos. I might dislike you. I barely listen to a video. But anyway, I'm out.